Look at that delivery uniform. Someone like you actually thinks you belong in this luxury business complex?
I'm only here to deliver what needs to be delivered.
Patrick Ndaisenga said coldly at exactly 8:16 am in the main lobby of an upscale mixed-use business residence in Kigali, Rwanda, drawing mocking laughter from several people nearby. Muriel Uwas simply tightened her grip on the envelope in her hand, offered a calm smile, and stepped into the elevator without saying a word. What no one in that lobby knew was that the woman they had just humiliated because of her delivery uniform was, in fact, the legal owner of the entire property where Patrick's company rented its headquarters. Before we begin, let us know which city or country you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more meaningful stories. The sky over Kigali was covered in a gentle orange glow as the last rays of sunlight reflected against the glass walls of modern buildings in Kachiru. Palm trees along the road swayed lightly in the evening breeze while cars slowly moved through traffic as people returned home after a long workday. On the 14th floor of the Imanzi Tech Solutions building, the light inside the director's office was still on. Mireille Uwas stood outside the office door holding a green insulated food container in her hands. She wore a mustard yellow office dress designed in a modern Rwandan style, and her braided hair was neatly tied at the back. It was dinner she had prepared herself that morning because she knew her husband would be busy with meetings again. She knocked twice. "May I come in?" From inside, Patrick Ndaiza answered shortly. "Come in." Mireille opened the door. The office was spacious, with glass walls overlooking the city, a walnut desk, and carefully tended green plants. Patrick was speaking with 3 business partners. His dark blue tailored suit made him look exactly like the image of a successful businessman on the cover of a business magazine. When he saw his wife, Patrick frowned slightly. "Mireille, why are you here? I knew you hadn't eaten dinner, so I brought you some food." An older man smiled. "Your wife is very thoughtful." Patrick did not smile. He quickly walked toward Mireille and lowered his voice. "Next time, don't come to the office like this." Mireille paused. "Why?" Patrick glanced toward his partners, then replied, "This is a workplace. I only brought food. I said don't." The air suddenly became heavy. Mireille stayed silent for a few seconds, then gently placed the food container on a small table near the door. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you." Patrick did not look at her. "Fine." Mireille turned and walked out. As the door closed behind her, she could still faintly hear laughter and the conversation continuing as if nothing had happened. Inside the elevator, she looked down at her hands. They still carried the scent of ginger and rosemary from the soup she had cooked. She smiled softly to herself. Maybe he was just under pressure. For years, whenever Patrick became harsh, she always found a reason to explain it for him. When his company was newly founded, they used to sit on the tiled floor of their small apartment in Nyamirambo, eating chapati because they could not yet afford a dining table. Patrick once held her hand and said, "One day I will build the biggest company in Kigali." Mireille had believed him, not only believed him. She had also taken extra freelance work to help him keep the business alive during its hardest months. She had never told anyone that she secretly sold the gold bracelet her mother had left her to pay the first month's office rent. To her, that had never felt like sacrifice. It was simply building a future with the person she loved. But as the company grew quickly, everything began to change. Patrick bought a new car. He bought an expensive watch. He attended more and more events for entrepreneurs. His circle of friends slowly changed. The conversations they used to have about dreams disappeared. In their place came talks about brand image, powerful connections, and luxury gatherings. That evening, Patrick came home later than usual. He removed his tie and sat on the sofa. Mireille placed a glass of water in front of him. "Did the meeting go well?" Patrick nodded. "Very well. I'm happy for you." He looked around the living room and slowly said, "This apartment is starting to feel too small." Mireille was surprised. "I think it's still enough for the 2 of us." Patrick shook his head. "Enough to live in, yes, but not enough to receive guests. My partners are successful people. They judge many things." Mireille sat across from him. "I think what matters most to them is still ability." Patrick let out a small laugh. "If you still think that way, then you don't understand this business world." That sentence made Muriel stop. She did not argue. She simply looked at the man in front of her. It was still the face she had loved for many years. But his eyes were different. In those eyes, she no longer saw the familiar warmth. Patrick continued, I'm thinking of moving the office to a new business district. The cost will be much higher, but clients will look at the company differently. Mireille gently asked, Is that really necessary? Patrick leaned back in his chair. That is why I run the business. If you don't understand, that's fine. A long silence followed. For the first time in many years of marriage, Mireille felt that the distance between them was no longer just a difference in opinion. It was a difference in how they saw human value. She realized Patrick had begun to judge everything by status, branding, and appearance. What hurt her most was not that he had earned more money. It was that he seemed to have forgotten the difficult days they had survived together. That night, after Patrick went into his study, Mireille stood alone on the balcony. The lights of Kigali glittered in the distance. She took a deep breath. A question suddenly appeared in her heart, one she had never dared to ask before. If success makes a person forget who they used to be, is it still success or only a loss hidden beneath a glamorous surface? She did not know the answer, but she sensed that her marriage was approaching a turning point neither of them was ready to face. 5:28 a.m. The alarm rang while most of Kigali was still covered in a thin layer of morning mist. Mireille Uwase opened her eyes immediately. She did not allow herself to lie in bed for even a few extra minutes. In her small but tidy apartment in Gisoze, she pulled back the curtains, took a deep breath, and began another day like hundreds of days before it. She brewed a pot of Rwandan coffee, prepared a few slices of bread with boiled eggs, then opened her old notebook. On the page were several lines written neatly. Today's income, savings, investment, do not buy unnecessary things. Mireille smiled and placed a small check mark beside the plan from the previous day. After divorcing Patrick, many people thought she would look for another office job to maintain the kind of life she once had. But Mireille chose to work as a delivery officer for a logistics company that specialized in transporting legal documents and business files. The job was more physically demanding and required her to move around constantly, but the income was steady. More importantly, it gave her control over her evenings, so she could study. As soon as she entered the logistics center, her colleague Samuel waved at her. Good morning, Mireille. Good morning, Samuel. Samuel looked at her uniform and smiled. I still don't understand why someone who used to work as a project manager would choose this job. Mireille adjusted the name tag on her chest because every honest job deserves respect. Samuel shook his head. If it were me, I don't think I'd be brave enough. Mireille smiled. It's not bravery. Sometimes you simply do what needs to be done. Her answer left Samuel silent for a long moment. Throughout the day, Mireille traveled across Kigali. Modern office towers, new residential areas, shopping centers, and banks slowly became familiar to her. What made the job special was that whenever she delivered documents to a company, she always spent a few minutes observing how the business operated. Some places treated clients professionally. Some places managed employees with respect. Others only knew how to give orders. Every delivery became a small lesson in business. In the evening, instead of going home to rest, Mireille brought her old laptop to the community library. She read books about asset investment, cash flow management, and property rental law. The concepts that once seemed dry gradually became something she genuinely enjoyed. Just as an online class ended, her phone rang. It was Emmanuel Habimana. He was the businessman she had met at a free investment seminar months earlier. He had never promised to make her rich. He only answered questions she had already tried to research on her own. Mireille, how far did you get today? I just finished the course on cash flow analysis. Good. Are you still planning to buy your first apartment? Mireille looked at the spreadsheet in front of her. I'm still missing part of the amount. Emmanuel asked calmly, how much are you missing? Enough that I need to keep saving. He laughed gently. You know, many people ask me what they should invest in. But very few ask how to understand an asset before putting money into it. Mireille listened carefully. Emmanuel continued, don't buy because everyone else is buying. Buy because you understand its value. Knowledge must always come before profit. She wrote each sentence into her small notebook. That was what Emmanuel always required. Do not memorize. P. Understand. Months later, Mireille used all her savings, along with a manageable loan, to purchase her first rental apartment in a developing area of Kigali. It was not the most luxurious apartment. It was not in the most expensive location, but it produced stable cash flow. She read every clause of the contract herself. She checked the electricity and water systems herself. She met each tenant herself. The first profit she received was not large, but instead of spending it, she put everything back into her investment fund. One apartment became two. Two became four. Years passed, and Mireille no longer bought single apartments one by one. She began purchasing empty floors inside the same modern mixed-use business residence, step by step. Daniela, she was happy, without rushing, without showing off. No one except her lawyer and accountant knew she was the person behind those transactions. Even her neighbors thought Mireille was still only a hard-working delivery officer. Someone once jokingly asked, "Why don't you buy a new car?" Mireille only smiled. "This car still takes me where I need to go." Another person asked, "Don't you feel sorry for yourself, living so frugally?" She answered gently, "I don't save because I'm afraid of being poor. I save so that my future decisions won't be forced by money." Many people did not understand, but Marie never tried to explain. She had realized one simple truth. A seed stays underground for a long time before it becomes a tree. If you dig it up every day just to prove you planted it, that tree will never have a chance to grow. So she chose to keep walking in silence. Only she knew that every document delivery was not merely supporting her present life, but quietly building a future strong enough that no one would ever again be able to decide the value of her life for her. Nyarutarama business residence was busier than usual. Neatly trimmed palm trees lined the entrance, elegant cafes were beginning to fill with customers, and the parking lot slowly welcomed new SUVs and polished sedans. This was one of Kigali's most sought-after mixed-use business residencies, chosen by many companies because of its convenient location and modern working environment. Patrick Ndaisenga stepped out of his car with full confidence. His charcoal gray tailored suit, polished leather shoes, and expensive wristwatch quickly drew glances from people passing by. Walking beside him was Diane Mukamana. She looked up at the building and smiled. "This place is more beautiful than I expected." Patrick nodded. "Exactly what I wanted." Diane looked at the balconies covered with greenery. "Clients will definitely be impressed." Patrick smiled lightly. "That is the whole point." They entered the main lobby. The shining stone floor reflected sunlight pouring through the tall glass walls. The seating area was decorated with wooden furniture and subtle traditional Rwandan patterns. The space felt luxurious without being loud. A receptionist stood and bowed politely. "Good morning, Mr. Ndaisenga. We have prepared the office tour documents for you." Patrick nodded. "Thank you." While they waited for the elevator, Diane asked curiously, "Which company owns this place?" Patrick shrugged. "I'm not sure. I only know the management team is very professional." Diane flipped through a few pages of the documents in her hand. "Is the owner's name listed here?" Patrick only glanced at it briefly. "It doesn't matter. What I need is the location. Whoever owns it won't affect anything." Diane laughed softly. "That sounds exactly like you." The elevator doors opened. The building manager, Aline Mukarugira, stepped out with a calm smile. "Good morning, Mr. Patrick. It is a pleasure to welcome you." Patrick shook her hand. "I've been looking forward to this." Aline led them to the highest floor of the office section. When the doors opened, Kigali appeared before them through wide glass windows. In the distance, Rwanda's green hills rose beautifully between modern neighborhoods. Patrick walked slowly around the space. He imagined where his company logo would be placed, how the meeting room would be designed, what kind of stone the reception desk would use. In his mind, the entire layout was almost already complete. Diane looked around and said, "When clients step in here, they will trust the company more." Patrick smiled with satisfaction. "That is exactly what I want." Aline gently added, "This residence always prioritizes businesses that aim for sustainable growth." Patrick answered immediately, "My company fits that perfectly. We are expanding very quickly." Aline only smiled politely. She did not comment. After many years in building management, she had learned one thing. Some business people liked to talk about what they were going to achieve. Others simply worked quietly and allowed results to speak for them. While a staff member introduced the smart electrical system and operating standards, Patrick barely paid attention. He only cared whether the place was impressive enough for clients. At the end of the tour, Aline placed a contract file on the table. If you agree, we can complete the leasing process this week. Patrick picked up a pen. He flipped quickly through the pages. Rent price, lease term, maintenance clauses, management fees. He checked them carefully. There was only one section he skipped, the line showing the property owner's name. Diane noticed and reminded him quietly, "You're not going to read that part." Patrick gave a faint smile. "As long as the contract is legal, that's enough. The landlord's identity won't change the growth of my company." Aline kept her calm expression. She closed the file. "We will prepare all the necessary documents." Patrick stood up. "I look forward to a long-term partnership." Aline nodded. "I hope you will be satisfied with the environment here." After Patrick and Diane left, a young staff member walked over. "Should we inform the new owner?" Aline looked down toward the courtyard below. After a moment, she replied, "Not yet." She said, "We should contact her only when it is truly necessary." The staff member looked surprised. "Does the owner rarely appear?" Aline smiled. "Some people like to let their assets work on their behalf, and they continue living very normally." She said nothing more. Inside the drawer of her desk, the saved copy of the contract lay neatly in place. On the first page, beneath the words property owner, was a familiar name Patrick had carelessly skipped over. Mireille Uwase. No one in the building knew that the woman who still appeared regularly in a delivery uniform was the same woman who had quietly built that property over many years. And no one could have imagined that Patrick's carelessness that morning would one day force him to face the greatest shock of his life when the lease renewal meeting arrived. 2:11 p.m. The executive meeting room of Imanzi Tech Solutions was filled with light from the large glass windows overlooking central Kigali. On the screen at the front of the room was a report about the company's expansion plan for the next 2 years. Patrick Indaisenga stood before the screen, confidently presenting to his senior management team. In everyone's eyes, this company was still growing steadily. The brand was becoming more recognized by partners, and placing the headquarters inside Nyarutarama business residence had been a smart decision. As soon as the meeting ended, Bosco Karemera, the finance director, walked in quickly with a blue folder. "Patrick, the building management team just sent a notice." Patrick took it. "What is it?" Bosco replied. "Our lease will expire in a few weeks." Patrick opened the file calmly. "Then we'll renew it." Bosco hesitated slightly. "This time, they want us to meet the owner directly before signing." Patrick raised an eyebrow. "Before we only dealt with management." Bosco nodded. "Maybe the landlord wants to review the major tenants." Patrick gave a small laugh. "That's normal." He placed the folder on the table. "Whoever they are, they'll want to keep stable businesses." Bosco opened another financial sheet. "The real estate market in Kigali is rising quickly. I'm worried the rent may be adjusted." Patrick folded his arms. "If the increase is reasonable, it won't be a problem. This location is worth it." Bosco still looked uneasy. "If they raise it too much, our operating costs will be affected." Patrick shook his head. "People who own large properties understand that keeping good tenants is more important than short-term rent increases." After saying that, he turned toward Diane Mukamana, who had just entered the room. "Any updates?" Diane smiled. "The communications team has finished the new branding launch plan." Patrick nodded with satisfaction. "Very good." Diane noticed the folder on the table. "Lease renewal?" "Yes." "Do you really have to meet the landlord?" Patrick smiled lightly. "Yes." Diane sat across from him. "I'm curious what kind of person they are." Patrick shrugged. "Probably a major investor, maybe an investment fund, or a family that owns several properties." Diane laughed. "I hope they're easy to work with." Patrick answered confidently, "If we are reliable tenants who pay on time, there is no reason to worry." Meanwhile, inside the building management office, Aline Mukarugira was reviewing all the documents before confirming the signing schedule. Jean-Claude Murenzi, the lawyer in charge of legal matters, walked in. "All the paperwork is ready." Aline nodded softly. "And the appointment?" It has been confirmed. Jean-Claude looked at her and asked quietly, should we inform them of the owner's identity beforehand? Aline closed the file. No, why not? That is what she requested. Jean-Claude immediately understood who Aline meant. I still find it rather unusual. For years she has barely appeared. Aline smiled. Some people like to be known. Others only want their work to be known. Jean-Claude nodded in agreement. This meeting may surprise that director quite a lot. Aline did not answer. She clearly remembered the day Mireille signed the final documents to complete the transfer of the entire business residence. The woman had worn a simple outfit, read every clause of the contract herself, and asked only 3 questions related to the rights of the existing tenants. At that time, Aline had been curious. You don't plan to adjust the rent after taking over. Mireille had only smiled. A building only has real value when the people working inside it also have a chance to grow. That sentence had stayed with Aline ever since. To her, Mireille was not like many other investors. She always saw property as a tool for creating long-term value, not a way to show off. That afternoon, Patrick's desk phone rang. He picked it up. Hello! Aline's gentle voice came through. Good afternoon, Mr. Ndazisenga. I'm calling to confirm your meeting with the owner of the residence. Patrick replied politely. Yes, I will be there, Aline continued. The meeting will include only the legal representative, the owner, and your company's side. Patrick smiled. I look forward to it. After ending the call, Diane immediately asked, what did they say? Patrick stood and looked through the glass window. They confirmed the appointment for the renewal signing. It should only take about an hour. Diane smiled. Who knows, maybe there will be future investment opportunities. Patrick nodded confidently. I think so too. At that moment, he was already imagining an older, experienced businessman or a representative from a wealthy real estate corporation. He had no idea that the name on the ownership certificate did not belong to any corporation, and he could never imagine that the person who would sit across from him at the upcoming contract meeting was the very woman he once believed would never accomplish anything significant after their divorce. Some appointments are arranged merely to finalize a contract, but some appointments force a person to look back at every judgment they once made about someone else. The VIP meeting room on the highest floor of Nyarutarama business residence was designed in a modern style blended with traditional Rwandan details. The natural wood conference table shone under the soft lights, while hand-woven artwork hung on the walls and green plants added a feeling of elegance and warmth. Patrick Ndayisenga entered with Bosco Karemera. He adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket and smiled confidently. Bosco looked around. This space is truly impressive. Patrick nodded. The investor must care a lot about image. A moment after they sat down, lawyer Jean-Claude Murenzi entered. He politely shook hands with each of them. Thank you for arriving on time. Patrick replied, it is my pleasure. Jean-Claude opened the file. The owner will arrive in a few minutes. Patrick smiled. I look forward to meeting them. In his mind, he was still imagining an older businessman or a representative from a well-known real estate corporation in Kigali. Bosco leaned closer. I hope everything goes smoothly. Patrick replied quietly, there is no reason it shouldn't. Outside the hallway, gentle footsteps approached. The meeting room door opened. Aline Mukarugera entered first. Right behind her was a woman wearing an emerald green suit, carefully tailored in a modern Rwandan style. Her hair was neatly styled, her face calm, her eyes confident but deeply composed. Patrick, who was holding a glass of water, suddenly froze. The glass in his hand seemed to stop in mid-air. Bosco's eyes widened too. The woman who had just entered was Mireille Uwase. The ex-wife Patrick had seen only 2 days earlier in a delivery uniform. The room fell so silent that the sound of the air conditioner became clear. Patrick stared at Mireille. He thought he must be seeing things. Mireille? His voice was so low that even he seemed unable to believe it. Mireille only nodded gently. Hello, Patrick. Her voice was calm as always. There was no mockery, no tension. Jean-Claude calmly introduced her. Allow me to introduce Mrs. Mireille Uwase, the legal owner of Nyarutarama business residence. Patrick went completely still. Bosco looked at Patrick, then at Mireille. He had no idea what was happening. Patrick forced a small laugh. There must be some kind of mistake. Jean-Claude calmly pushed the file forward. All ownership certificates, transfer documents, and legal confirmations are included here. Patrick opened the first page. His eyes stopped on the bold line. Owner Mire Uwas. He turned another page, then another. The same name remained. Not representative, not shareholder. Owner Patrick lifted his head. You Mire sat down across from him. Shall we begin? Her voice was steady, as if this were only an ordinary business meeting. Patrick was still stunned. I don't understand. Mireille looked directly at him. That's all right. The documents will explain everything clearly. Jean-Claude opened the summary section. This residence was transferred several years ago. The ownership currently belongs to Mrs. Mireille Uwas. Everything was completed according to Rwandan law. Patrick tightened his hands slightly. In his mind, the scene from that morning returned again and again. The delivery uniform, the grey envelope, the words he himself had said in the lobby. Someone like you actually thinks you belong in this luxury business complex. Now every word seemed to turn back toward him. Bosco finally broke the silence. Excuse me, Mrs. Uwas. I am truly surprised. Mireille smiled politely. I understand. Bosco looked at her with curiosity. But why do you still work as a delivery officer? Mireille did not avoid the question. That job helps me understand people. It also helps me understand how businesses operate. And more importantly, it is honest work. The room fell silent again. Patrick looked at the woman before him. This was still the Mireille he had lived with for nearly 10 years. Yet she was completely different. In the past, whenever he challenged her, she often stayed quiet to keep peace. Today, her calmness no longer came from endurance. It came from confidence. Patrick took a deep breath. You never told me. Muriel shook her head lightly. You never asked, just one short sentence. But Patrick had no answer. He suddenly remembered countless times when he spoke only about his own success and never once asked what Mireille was studying, what she was pursuing, or what she was dreaming about. Perhaps. He had never truly seen her. Jean-Claude gently placed a pen on the table. Mr. Ndaisenga, if there are no further questions about the owner's legal status, we will move on to the lease renewal terms. Patrick looked at the file, then back at Mireille. For the first time in years, the familiar confidence on his face completely disappeared. He was no longer thinking about image, status, or glamour. He had only realized a truth that weighed heavily on his heart. The woman he once believed would live in failure after their divorce had quietly built a future far greater than anything he had ever imagined. And what shamed him most was not the difference in wealth. It was that he had judged a person's value by the uniform they were wearing. 3:18 p.m. After the meeting paused, Patrick Ndaisenga remained sitting motionless in the conference room. In front of him was the lease renewal file, but his mind had been pulled back into a stream of memories he had not wanted to revisit for years. Bosco Carimera quietly closed the door and turned to look at his boss. Patrick, are you all right? Patrick rubbed his forehead. I don't know anymore. Bosco sat across from him. I still can't believe it. Patrick gave a bitter smile. I used to think I knew her better than anyone. And now it turns out I knew nothing. At that moment, Jean-Claude entered with another set of documents. I've brought additional records at the owner's request. Patrick raised his head. What kind of records? Jean-Claude placed the documents on the table. You have the right to review them so you can better understand the investment history of this property. Patrick opened the first page. It was not a simple asset summary. It was a timeline of each transaction. The first apartment, the first office floor, the first loan. The loan that had been fully paid off. The contracts used to acquire different parts of the residence. Everything had happened over many years. Not one transaction had appeared out of nowhere. Patrick turned the pages one by one. There was no mysterious investment, no sponsor, no foreign investment fund. Each purchase had been made using profits from the assets before it. Bosco looked at the numbers and said quietly, this looks like building brick by brick. Jean-Claude nodded. Exactly. No miracle. Patrick read the financial report. He realized that for many years, Mireille had barely withdrawn any profit for herself. Everything had been reinvested. He asked softly, what did she live on? Jean-Claude answered calmly, her salary from her delivery job. Patrick looked up sharply. You mean, she still went to work every day? Jean-Claude nodded. Yes, a stable job, a stable income, a very simple life. Patrick pressed his lips together. In his mind, he saw Muriel's old car, her delivery uniform always clean, the modest watch on her wrist. He had once believed those things were signs of failure. Now he understood. There had been choices. Bosco turned to another page. Look at this. Patrick followed his gaze. It was a list of courses Mireille had completed. Property management, real estate law, financial analysis, risks management, long-term investing. All of them had taken place in the evenings or on weekends. Patrick froze. He clearly remembered the period after their divorce. Once he had seen Marie by chance in a cafe, focused on her laptop. At the time, he had assumed she was looking for a job. He had never walked over to ask. He had never cared. Jean-Claude looked at Patrick. Mrs. Mireille asked me to pass along one message. Patrick raised his head. What message? Jean-Claude smiled. She said, please do not think her success appeared overnight. Some things are only seen by others at the finish line. But they never see the thousands of days that began very early. The room fell silent. Patrick leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed, not because someone else had become more successful than him, but because of the way he had understood success. He had always noticed the car someone drove, the suit they wore, the office they worked in, but he had never asked what they had sacrificed to get there. Bosco spoke slowly. Patrick, I remember you once said successful people should know how to enjoy life. Patrick smiled faintly. I remember. Bosco looked at the file. Maybe Mrs. Mireille enjoys life too. Her way of enjoying it is just different from ours. Patrick did not answer. He suddenly realized Mireille had never chased the need to prove she was rich. What she had pursued was freedom in decision-making, the freedom to invest, the freedom to help others, the freedom not to panic whenever the market changed. After a while, the door opened. Aline Mukarugira stepped in. I'm sorry to keep everyone waiting. Mrs. Mireille has finished her call with a partner. We can continue the meeting now. Patrick stood by instinct. Aline looked at him and said gently, before we go in, I want to share something. Patrick listened closely. Many people think the value of a building is measured by the number of floors or its market price. Mrs. Mireille always says the opposite. Patrick asked, what does she say? Aline smiled. She says the value of a property is measured by the number of people who can build their future inside it. Patrick went still. That was a way of thinking he had never had. To him before, real estate had been profit, rent, occupancy rate. But to Mireille, property was all's responsibility, opportunity. A place where hundreds of people placed their work and their dreams. When Aline left, Patrick remained standing for a few seconds in front of the meeting room door. He understood that what made him fall behind Mireille was not the amount of property she owned. It was that for years, he had been busy building only his own career, while Mireille had quietly built the person she wanted to become. And that foundation was the most valuable asset no crisis could ever take away. The meeting resumed after the short break. Sunlight poured through the large glass windows, spreading a soft golden glow across the wooden table. The room was still quiet, but the atmosphere was completely different from before. Patrick Indaisenga had first entered with the confidence of a powerful tenant. Now he sat with his back straight, his hands clasped together, waiting for a decision that could affect the future of his company. Bosco Carimera quietly placed his notebook on the table. He looked at Patrick and said softly, we prepared a plan in case the rent increases. Patrick nodded. I know. Bosco lowered his voice. If the adjustment is too high, we may have to cut several investments. Patrick did not answer. In his mind, Aline's words from the hallway returned again. The value of a property is measured by the number of people who can build their future inside it. He had never imagined that a property owner could think that way. At that moment, Mireille Uwase entered the room. She was still wearing the emerald green suit from earlier, holding a thin file in her hand. Her face remained calm, her eyes showing no sign of victory or defeat. Jean-Claude gently stood. If everyone is ready, we will begin the final part. Mireille sat across from Patrick. She opened the file and looked around the room. We are here today to discuss the lease renewal. I believe the most important thing is that both sides understand their goals clearly. Patrick nodded slightly. I agree. Jean-Claude handed the new draft to Bosco. Bosco's read it quickly. As soon as his eyes reached the second page, they widened. He read it again to make sure he was not mistaken. Patrick noticed the change. "What is it?" Bosco handed him the contract. "You should read it yourself." Patrick looked down. He went straight to the rent adjustment section. Then he froze. "The current rental rate will remain unchanged." He read further. "The rate will remain stable for the following years." There was no increase at all. Patrick raised his head. "Why?" Mireille calmly asked back. "Why not?" Patrick answered slowly. "The Kigali real estate market is rising. Many properties have already adjusted their rates. You have every right to do the same." Mireille smiled lightly. "Yes, I do have the right." She paused for a few seconds, but having the right does not mean I must use it. The room fell silent. Jean-Claude nodded slightly, as if he had already expected that answer. Mireille continued. "When I reviewed the reports from the companies renting here, I realized the most important thing was not increasing profit for 1 year. It was helping responsible businesses grow over the long term." Patrick listened closely. Mireille opened another file. "I will also launch a tenant support program." Bosco looked surprised. "Support?" "Yes. We will organize business management consultations, legal guidance, financial connections, cash flow management training, completely free for the companies operating in this residence." Patrick stared at her in amazement. "Investing more like that will reduce profit." Mireille answered calmly. "Possibly, but if everyone's business grows, this residence grows too. That is a worthwhile investment." Patrick looked down at the contract. For the first time in his years of doing business, he heard a property owner talk more about shared benefit than personal profit. He asked quietly, "You never thought about revenge?" Jean-Claude and Bosco both fell silent. It was the question everyone in the room probably wanted to ask. Mary looked at Patrick for a long moment. Then she answered gently, "If I made a decision today, only to make you suffer, tomorrow I would have to look at myself. And I do not want to become that kind of person." Patrick swallowed slightly. Mireille continued, "Your company has many employees. They go to work every day to support their families. If I raise the rent just because of our past, the first people to pay the price might not even be you. It might be an employee who gets laid off. It might be a father who loses his job. It might be a mother who can no longer afford her family's needs. I do not want innocent people to carry the consequences of our story." No one said another word. Patrick felt his throat tighten. For years he had believed success meant winning. Today he finally understood. Some people win by making others lose, but others win because they are strong enough not to turn power into a tool for hurting people. Bosco quietly placed his pen down. He looked at Mireille with deep respect. "I have worked in finance for more than 15 years. This is the first time I have seen an owner make a decision like this." Mireille smiled. "I don't think I am doing anything extraordinary. I only believe that if a building helps many businesses grow, its value becomes much greater than the numbers on a profit report." Patrick silently signed the contract. When he placed the pen down, he realized the winner in that room was not the person who owned more property. It was the person who had refused to let the wounds of the past decide how she treated others in the present. 4:31 p.m. After the lease renewal procedures were completed, the executive hallway slowly became quiet. The legal staff carried the documents away for filing, while the managers returned one by one to their work. Through the clear glass windows, the green hills surrounding Kigali appeared beneath the soft afternoon light, creating a peaceful view that stood in contrast to the emotions moving through Patrick Ndaisenga's heart. He stood silently outside Mireille Uwasi's office door for quite some time. Several times he raised his hand to knock, then lowered it again. In all his years of running a business, Patrick had never been afraid to enter any meeting room. But today he found it difficult simply to face the woman he once thought he understood better than anyone. A secretary walked over gently. "Sirs, Mrs. Mireille is still inside." Patrick nodded. "Please let her know, if she is willing. I would like to speak with her for a few minutes." A few minutes later, the door opened. Mireille stood there with a polite smile. "Please come in." Patrick stepped into a spacious office that was arranged with surprising simplicity. There were no extravagant decorations or expensive art pieces as he had imagined. On the bookshelf were books about management, business law, community development, and sustainable economics. In one corner of the room, several Rwandan orchids were blooming. Patrick looked around and said quietly, "Your office is different from what I expected." Mire smiled. "Please sit." After they both sat down, the room fell into silence. No lawyer, no manager, no contract. Only two people who had once been husband and wife. Patrick took a deep breath. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Muriel answered calmly. "What do you want to say?" Patrick looked down at his hands. "Since this morning, I have been thinking a lot. I realized I never truly knew you." Muriel did not interrupt. Patrick continued, "I always thought that after the divorce, you would need help. I thought you wouldn't be able to stand on your own. I even thought your delivery job proved your life wasn't going well." He laughed softly, but there was bitterness in it. "It turns out the person trapped in those assumptions was me." Murray listened quietly. Patrick raised his head. "When I saw you in the lobby, I said terrible things. I am sorry. It was not a casual apology." His voice was slow and heavy, as if he were untying knots that had been inside him for years. Murray looked at him for a long time, then asked gently, "Do you know what hurt me the most that day?" Patrick shook his head slightly. "I was not hurt because of the uniform. I was not hurt because of the people around us either." Patrick remained silent. Murray continued, "I was hurt because the person who once walked with me through the hardest days was the same person judging my value by that uniform." Patrick closed his eyes slightly. Each word touched something he had tried to avoid. He remembered the early years of building his company. Miriam had stayed up late, helping him review contracts. She had brought food to the office. She had encouraged him after every failed project. Yet when the company grew, he had begun to see only expensive suits, elegant meetings, and praise from the business world. He had forgotten the person who had stood beside him from the beginning. Patrick's voice became rougher. "Maybe success changed me." Muriel gently shook her head. "No, success does not change anyone. It only reveals more clearly what was already inside them." Patrick froze. That sentence made him think for a long time. He slowly asked, "Did you ever hate me?" Mary smiled faintly. "Yes." Patrick lowered his head. "But that feeling did not last." "Why?" "Because if I kept holding on to resentment, the person trapped would be me." Patrick looked at the woman in front of him. This was no longer the Mireille from years ago, not because she was richer, not because she owned more property, but because she had learned how to master her own emotions, and that was far harder than making money. After a long silence, Patrick slowly stood. "I didn't come here to ask for another chance. I know that chapter ended a long time ago. I only wanted you to know that. I am truly sorry." Mireille stood as well. "I accept your apology." Patrick looked surprised. "That's all?" Miriam smiled. "Yes, I don't need you to make up for anything. And I don't need you to prove anything. I only hope that from today onward, you will treat the people who work with you more fairly." Patrick nodded slightly. "I will try." Miriam walked closer to the window. The afternoon light covered Kigali in a warm golden color. She spoke slowly. "You know, for a while I thought I had to become successful just to prove you were wrong." Patrick went still. "But then I realized, if I lived only to prove someone else wrong, then my life was still being controlled by them." Patrick followed her gaze out toward the city. Mireille smiled. "When I began living for what I believed in, that was when I finally felt free." Patrick said nothing more. He lowered his head respectfully and quietly left the office. When the door closed behind him, Mireille did not feel victorious. She only felt that an old chapter of her life had truly ended. And Patrick walked slowly down the hallway with a feeling he had never known before. For the first time in years, he understood that an apology cannot change the past, but if it is sincere enough, it can become the beginning of a person learning how to live better in the future. 1 year had passed since that unforgettable lease signing. The final sunlight of the day covered Nyarutarama business residence in a warm golden glow. The green courtyard was now much livelier than before. The cafes on the ground floor were full of customers. Office workers chatted happily as they left work. and the shared common area had been renovated into a networking space for the businesses renting inside their residence. Mire Oasis walked slowly along the stone pathway, holding the first-year summary report of the business support program. Aline Mukarugira approached her with a bright smile. "Congratulations," Mire smiled. "What are you congratulating me for?" Aline pointed toward the digital display board in the lobby. "See for yourself." Mire looked up. Over the past 12 months, dozens of tenant companies had joined free training sessions on management, finance, and digital transformation. Many small companies had expanded, creating more jobs for workers in Kigali. The rate of businesses renewing their leases had also increased noticeably because they no longer saw the residents as just a place to work, but as a community where people could grow together. Mire nodded softly. That is what truly deserves celebration. Aline looked at her. "Many property owners have contacted us to ask why this model works." Mire smiled lightly. "Because we do not see tenants as income sources. We see them as partners." Aline nodded in agreement. "Maybe that is the difference." At that moment, inside the ground floor hall, a gathering between tenant businesses was about to begin. Bosco Karemera stood beside Patrick Nandaisenga, looking around the room with a soft smile. "I never thought our company would take part in so many training programs." Patrick looked at groups of employees cheerfully exchanging experience with one another. "I didn't think so either," Bosco asked. "Do you regret anything?" Patrick stayed silent for a few seconds. "Yes, but not because I once failed. I regret spending too many years judging people by appearances." Bosco nodded slightly. "I've seen you change a lot." Patrick smiled. "Maybe because I finally understand that success is not about making others look up at you. It is about helping more people move forward together." Just then, Mire entered the hall. She did not appear as a speaker. She did not stand on the stage. She simply walked quietly among the guests, stopping to ask different business owners about their progress. A young female entrepreneur stepped forward and shook her hand. "Mrs. Mire, if it had not been for your mentorship program, my company might have closed." Mire answered gently. "I only opened an opportunity. You were the one who took it." The woman smiled emotionally. "I will work hard so that one day I can help others the way you helped me." Muriel nodded. "That is what I hope for most." From a distance, Patrick silently watched the conversation. He did not walk over. He did not want to interrupt. But inside him, a different feeling began to grow. In the past, he had always believed influential people were those known by many. Today, he realized that truly influential people were those who helped others believe in their own ability. A little while later, Diane Mukamana also walked over. She looked at Mire and smiled sincerely. "I want to thank you." Mire looked slightly surprised. "Thank me for what?" Diane replied, "Because of the training sessions here, I decided to build a skills mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs. I realized competition is not the only way to succeed." Mire smiled. "I wish you success." There was no awkwardness, no jealousy, only respect between two mature women. When the gathering ended, Patrick walked toward Mire. He smiled. "My company has just completed a new internal training plan." Mire looked at him. "Congratulations." Patrick continued. "From now on, every new manager must attend a course on building a culture of respect for employees." Mire nodded lightly. "That is a good beginning." Patrick looked around the courtyard. "Thank you." Mire smiled. "No, you should thank yourself for choosing to change." Patrick lowered his head slightly. He understood what she meant. No one can change a person if that person does not want to change. Evening slowly settled over Kigali. The laughter of business owners, employees, and guests blended with the cool breeze, making the residents feel full of life. Mire stood quietly and looked at the scene before her. She remembered the day she had walked into this place wearing a delivery uniform and had been mocked by her ex-husband. If she had only carried the desire for revenge, perhaps today she would have felt satisfied. But this beautiful scene would not exist. There would be no growing businesses, no jobs protected, no people inspiring one another. She smiled softly. In the end, what makes a building valuable is not its modern walls or market price. It is the dreams being nurtured inside it. And what makes a person truly successful is not how far they have gone. It is how many people they have helped move forward along the way. P. What stayed with me most after this story was not that Mariel became the owner of an entire business residence, but how she chose to treat the persons who once hurt her. P. In life, there will always be people who judge us by the work we do, the clothes we wear, or the situation we are currently in. P. But what they see is only one moment, not the whole journey. Never feel ashamed because you are starting from a lower place, because a person's value is not found in a title or a uniform, but in discipline, a willingness to learn, and daily perseverance. P. True success is not about making those who once looked down on us feel ashamed. It is about becoming mature enough not to use power or achievement as a tool for revenge. P. When we use success to create more opportunities for others, we do not only build a career, we build character. P. Perhaps the most beautiful victory is not standing above others, but moving forward with a peaceful heart, no longer controlled by the past, and always ready to plant something good for the future. P. If you were Mireille, would you keep the rent unchanged or choose another path? Share your thoughts, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe.